qualifications or thank you. This is the information session for the King County Language Access Request for Qualifications RFQ, which was launched last Friday, December 10th. This session is being recorded and we will post it on Zoom Grants along with all the questions and answers that come up from today's session. So please keep yourself on mute for the first part of this presentation and hold all questions to the end. And at that point, we'll go ahead and check in and ask you if you have any questions. So for introductions, my name is Joanna Armstrong. I am the coordinator for this RFQ. I work with DCHS, which is the Department of Community and Human Services in King County. And Tiffany, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany No. I'm also a contract specialist with DCHS, and I'll be helping compile the questions and answers notes for today. Claudia?
Claudia will be joining us shortly. My name is Amanda Kay, she, her pronouns, and I am the Language Access Program Manager working in the COVID response and Equity and Community Partnerships organization. And just as another side note, in the chat, there is a link to closed captions. So if you need closed captions, you can click on it. It's the second link in chat that is closed captions, and you can use that. Thanks.
This is Annette. I manage the interpretation program for the public health centers, and I'm part of the public health language access liaison team. And I have been working with Joanna and with Amanda on this RFP process, and I'm here to answer any questions specific to the work that we do in public health.
Great, thank you all. So we'll talk a little bit about what is the Language Access RFQ. What King County is doing is developing a pool of language access providers for verbal language interpretation, American Sign Language, and other sign interpretation and CART captioning. And what we mean by vendor pool is a list of language access providers that any staff member in King County can do business with. So this RFQ is requesting applications from language access providers to join this vendor pool. And when we say RFQ, what we're referencing is all the documents you see here. You'll be able to open them up in Zoom Grants, and we'll get to that in a moment. So the first one is the RFQ guidelines, which provides general information about the RFQ. There's 3 separate attachments for the applications, one for verbal interpretation, one for sign, and one for CART. Attachment 2 is scoring criteria, which will tell you how we select the applications that will go into the language access vendor pool. Attachment 3 is the glossary of terms. We have a lot of defined terms, so anything capitalized in the documents is going to be defined in the glossary of terms. And finally, attachment 4 is the data security requirements we will expect you all to comply with. So the way you will apply for this is going to Zoom Grants, and I will put the link in the chat right here so that you can click and follow along. We will walk through this application in just a minute. And in Zoom Grants, what you'll do is respond to all the questions in each tab. You will add information to the required documentation tab and submit any additional documents that you'd like us to consider. And just to note that submitting an application does not guarantee a contract, and we will talk about the selection criteria soon. And my name is Joanna Armstrong. I use she, her pronouns, and you can reach me at dchscontracts@kingcounty.gov with any questions. Please only reach out to me and no one else to ask questions about the language access RFQ. We just want to make sure everybody's getting the same information consistently. So we'll do a quick demo. When you click on that link, this is what you will see. So if you look up here, this first set of blue tabs along here is information about the RFQ. So under description is just a short overview of what this RFQ is. Who can apply is the eligibility criteria and who we will prioritize for contracts. If you have any questions, this is how you can submit written questions to me. This is the info session information, and any other information about communication can be found there. The library is where all these documents are that I just described that are part of the RFQ. So if you click on Show Library, you can click on any one of these links to pull up those documents. And we do recommend that you look through each of these documents just to make sure you have all the information you need to apply. Back to admin, if you click on this tab, it'll just pull up an email to me. And show join meeting is just how you can link to this info session. So if you want to apply for this, you'll have to create an account or and log in. So once you log in, you'll be able to actually fill in all the information here, but we're just going to walk through it right now. So the second row of blue tabs is the actual application. The first questions you're going to get are summary questions. So it's your name, the language access service you're going to provide, some information about your agency or yourself. And then one question we need to ask up front is, where are you going to be serving clients? So if you can just check the zip codes that you'll be able to serve, that would be great. And if you're going to be able to serve anybody in King County, you can just check this box here for all. Then the first set of questions here are for the individual interpreters and captioners. So who will actually be doing the interpretation and the captioning? This second set of questions here is about the actual organizational structure and customer service that we can expect. And the first three questions are going to be about exactly what services you're offering. So you can check the box for verbal, ASL, CART. And for this first question, you can only check one. We are asking that people submit separate applications for each type of language access services. And then below, you can check as many boxes as you want for 2 and 3. And this is what type of interpretation. Is it going to be in-person, telephonic, remote CART, on-site CART, et cetera? And then what kind of a request you're accepting, whether it's on demand, pre-scheduled, or rush. And for these 2 and 3, you can check as many boxes as apply. And for required documentation, we are asking for a price proposal. So if you could fill in all this information here, and if you have other costs, fees associated with your services besides the ones listed here, please go ahead and enter them in here, name the cost, and then give us the price. Down here, we're asking for the key staff who would be involved and provide us with some references so we can contact them. And then finally, if it's relevant, the languages that you offer. So if you can go through and enter the languages and then fill in all this other information, whether the language is available on demand, rush, or pre-scheduled, simultaneous interpretation, consecutive, et cetera. So if you can just fill out all this information. And if this is just too burdensome for you to fill all this in, or any of these tables, actually, you can attach documents. You don't have to fill it in the tables here. So additional documents is where you can upload documents to satisfy any of these other requirements or give us any additional information. So that's the application. And how applicants will be selected. As I said, not all applications will be entered into the vendor pool. They first need to be complete and responsive. And if you look to the glossary in attachment 3, we define what we mean by responsive, so you can look at that. Applications must contain all the components in the checklist, which we will get to in a second. Must pass a reference check with the references that you give us, and applications must score above the threshold to be considered for a contract. And scoring will be done by a review panel, and the review panel will be made up of King County staff, subject matter experts in language access, and community members who have received language access from us before. So applications that receive a high enough score will be recommended for a contract. And the final step is just approval from leadership in both Department of Community and Human Services and Public Health. So our division and department directors just need to sign off. And this is the checklist for a complete application. You can find this checklist in the RFQ guidelines and in any of the 3 applications. So we need the basic information, which we went over. We need you to affirm that you can meet the minimum requirements, and minimum requirements will be spelled out in your application document. Then each of the application questions, which we just went over, and then the required documentation that we went over. And you'll see here, some of these are unscored. We will not be scoring every single question and every single component. Some of this is just informational for us. So for example, whatever your pricing is, we will not be scoring it. We do need to know what your pricing is. And you can look to attachment 2 scoring criteria to find out more about what we're scoring and how. So if you are selected to join the vendor pool, the first thing is that you will get a pay-as-you-go contract for a term of 6 years. And by pay-as-you-go, we mean there's no minimum amount that you can earn from this contract, and there's also no maximum amount. So as we request services for you and as you invoice us, we will pay each of those invoices. And once you have a contract in place, you'll be added to the county-wide language access vendor pool. And that means any King County staff or staff designated individual might contact you to request services as the need arises. And just a little point of clarification on what we mean by staff designated individuals. For DCHS, we have some contractors that provide community services that often require language access support. And in some of those cases, DCHS has agreed to pay for those language access services directly. So King County DCHS staff might authorize a contractor of ours to contact anybody in the vendor pool for services, and you would just bill DCHS directly. And I will pass it to Annette for the next couple slides. Annette, you are on mute.
Thank you. This slide is to give you an overview of all the different, or many of the different King County departments who are currently using language access services. The largest users at the moment are my own department, which is public health, King County Metro, the Metro Transit Department. I would say the Department of Natural Resources is a large user of interpretation and language services. The executive office, but the demand varies widely by department. And I think because King County is focused on providing greater language access to all of our residents through our departments, there will be greater usage from all of these different departments going forward. The public health centers, which fall under the public health department, currently have a team of their own staff medical interpreters. Their greatest role is to provide medical interpretation for the providers and staff at the different public health centers, but also for folks out in the field, whether it be COVID testing or vaccination mobile vaccination vans going out into the field. And so it's important that we incorporate our own staff interpreters into any system that we adopt. So for example, if you're providing a telephonic interpretation service, providing many different languages, it's important that you have a system that will enable us to funnel calls directly to our own public health center interpreters first before they go to the vendor. So for example, the system that we have currently invites people to press 1 for Spanish, 2 Russian, Ukrainian, 3 for any other language. When people press 1 for Spanish, they are automatically sent through to our public health interpreters. If nobody is available, that call then rolls to a vendor, but our own interpreters get first shot at these calls coming through. So we ask that if you're providing a telephonic or video service for multiple languages, that you incorporate our own public health interpreters into your system. And I'm happy to answer more questions about that at the end.
Thank you for that. So yeah, this is a question that's asked in the application for anyone who's offering on-demand telephonic verbal language interpretation. So we would ask you to respond to that question in the application if that applies to you. And if not, you can go ahead and enter NA into that question. So that's the end of our presentation, and we can go ahead and take questions now. Please raise your hand if you want to ask questions, or you can enter anything into the chat. Do we have any questions?
Joanne, it looks like we have a question from Carol.
Okay. Carol, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Do certifications, I'm a cart provider. Do certifications come into the picture at all? Are those important?
Yes, so if you open up the application for CART services, I think that's attachment to 1C. We talk about qualified and certified, and the attachment 3, the glossary defines what we mean by certified. So that does factor in, and we'll just kind of want to know how many qualified and how many certified providers you have.
Okay. And what kind of that describes what kind of certifications you're looking for in the glossary?
In the glossary, yeah, and the application will describe what kind of certifications we're referencing.
Okay. How do you oversee any changes in a provider's situation? Say they sell out to a larger company that's has different ways of managing their business. How do you keep track of that kind of thing?
That is a very good question. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. We're still working out how we're going to run the program once we have it up and running. So are you referencing after a contract has been issued or before the application?
After, life happens, things change.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I'll have to get back to you. So as we start to work that out, I will post responses in Zoom grants.
Okay, great. Is automatic speech recognition a suitable way to provide captions under this program?
If you can just describe that in your application, that would be helpful. Would there be a way to kind of correct as it goes?
Our company does not provide that type of captioning. So I'm just curious if that's something that is that you're open to using or not, or I'd like to have some more information.
Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead and apply with that and just make sure it's clear what that service is so that we can kind of assess when we get to the scoring phase. But yeah, we are accepting applications for all forms of language access that are kind of fit under those 3 categories of verbal, sign language, and CART captioning. So thank you. Yeah.
Okay, under CART captioning, there are a couple of ways of providing that. And my company only provides live captioners, most of whom have national certifications. But there are other companies that provide the automated speech recognition. And I would think you'd want to know that, what someone is providing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so we would just ask that to be spelled out, clarified in the application.
Okay. How would rate increases be handled if needed? I mean, a 6-year contract, how would that be addressed?
Rate increases could happen by amendment. We aren't scoring rates, so that's not something anybody's application will be affected by. So I think we would just have to, if that's something you're anticipating, then that's helpful to add into the contract, or sorry, into the application that you anticipate rate increases in the span of the 6-year contract, and we can take that into consideration.
Is that something are you saying that's something we could put into our application, that the first year would be this rate, the second year would be this rate?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that sounds good. So if I have any other questions. And will I find out what kind of references you need by looking at the glossary?
Anybody who can speak to the quality of your services.
Okay.
We're not being too prescriptive about what references, so anybody you feel would be a client that can offer a good insight into your services.
Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joanna, we have 2 questions within the chat. The first one is from Joanna. How long will it take to know if you are chosen to work with you after submitting the application?
So the close date for all applications is February 15th, 2022. And so we won't be looking at any applications until then. We do want to give everybody an opportunity to go back and change their application if they need to. Something may change. We may need to amend the RFQ, and we want to give everyone an opportunity to make any changes they need to up until the deadline. So we don't know exactly how long it's going to take to score and get to a decision, just because we don't know how many applications we're getting. So for now, we would probably estimate a month from the close date for when we might be able to have a decision, but that may change depending on how many applications we get.
Thank you.
Joanna, we have another question in chat from Joe. When department employees hold the information, for example, rates, that is provided in the strictest confidence when they view the list of vendors. For example, will they need to sign a non-disclosure agreement before viewing the information?
By information, are you referencing the information for the interpretation that's to be done? So if there's a confidential meeting that's being interpreted?
Joe, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, you can go ahead and clarify.
Oh, will anything in the application be confidential? So you mean the review panel who's scoring? I will say that everybody who reviews the applications does sign a non-disclosure agreement and a conflict of interest statement if they're reviewing the application. And the applications are not made public. However, because we are a government entity, they are subject to public disclosure requests. So if there's anything that you're submitting that you want to maintain confidentiality for, so that it's not subject to public disclosure requests, I believe we have that spelled out in the RFQ guidelines, how to make that request. And if not, I'll add that to Zoom grants, but there is a way that you can try to exempt your parts of your application from public disclosure requests.
Joanna, Joe clarified within the chat. And I think if I can extrapolate just a little bit, he is trying to understand if department employees, when they are looking for an interpreter, will they be able to see the specific rates of anybody in the vendor list?
In the pool, once in the vendor pool, then yes, all department employees can see the rates, because they'll need to make a decision about who to use, and rates may factor in. But it will be an internal, as far as I know. I'll have to clarify that with the team over the next couple of months, but it would be an internal facing website for King County employees, not available to anybody. And confidentially, I don't think I could guarantee confidentiality of the rates, because in part, as I mentioned earlier, DCHS contractors outside of King County may contact anybody in the vendor pool for services, so they would find out about the rates. So it would be difficult to maintain any kind of confidentiality around the rates.
I don't see any other questions in chat, Joanna.
Okay. Are there any final thoughts or questions? I'll leave a few awkward moments of silence, just anybody last chance to ask questions.
Joanna, there is one more from Joe, and it's so we can ask to see other vendors' rates.
Once they're in the vendor pool, it would, again, yeah, once it's in the vendor pool, it would be subject to public disclosure requests. So anybody could file a public disclosure request and ask for the rates. As far as whether just casually you could ask for the rates, that's something else I would have to get back to you all on, what our processes will be internally.
Joanna, Fong in the chat asked if you could put the Zoom grant link back in the chat again.
All right,
Oh,
there it is.
thank you.
Oh, did I send it to you? Sorry.
You sent it to me.
I will send it to everybody.
It looks like Olga has her hand up.
Yeah, Olga. If you're talking, I can't hear you.
Olga, I see that you are unmuted, but we still can't hear you.
You can type your question into the chat if you're having audio issues.
Carol, I see that you have your hand up. Is that from your previous question or did you have another question?
That was for my previous question. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
I'll give Olga a few minutes to see if she wants to enter the question in the chat. And yes, this I see in the chat, there's a question. Will this recording be available to those who missed the sessions? Yes, we recorded this session and we recorded Tuesday's session. So we'll make both of those available in Zoom Grants once we have the recordings processed. And we will also post all the questions and answers from this session. I'm also going to put in the chat my email address again, if anybody wants to follow up with any questions. Olga, did you want to enter your question in the chat? Okay. Olga, I'll invite you to send me an email if you want to follow up with me after this session. And are there any last minute, any final thoughts or questions before we sign off? Okay. So Olga, please send me an email with your question. It's in the chat. I'd love to hear from you and answer any questions you have. Okay. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate you coming out.